Senator O'Donnell. You've 8 minutes, Senator.
Ira Minister. I'm deputising for my colleague Senator Paul Gavin, who's in committee, so apologies from him to you. And I want to thank you for being with us and making such a comprehensive contribution on what is a very welcome initiative and endeavour by yourself and your department in this regard. I thought I would preface my own remarks by saying, Fado, once upon a time I had, probably I'm sure Senator O'Riordan would agree, one of the most important jobs in any school. I was a classroom assistant. So I have to say that experience for me, working at a Gael school in West Belfast for a number of years, I can actually imagine and appreciate the significant and positive impact a scheme like this could have on many of our young people. So, in welcoming you, Minister, to the Chamber and indeed the introduction of the wellbeing classes by your department as a new subject in the new junior cycle curriculum, Sinn Féin's position that schools should play an active role in providing in providing and ensuring social, physical and emotional well-being for students. Therefore, we support the introduction of the new wellbeing classes as a move by the Government in the right direction. To my knowledge, the new wellbeing subject will include the learning in classrooms of skills and abilities that will aid students in looking after their own mental health, skills that will most certainly be invaluable to them throughout the rest of their lives. Research published earlier this year by the Irish Health Behaviour in School-Aged Children found that 28% of kids in our schools reported feeling low every week or more in the last 6 months, while 43% of all students felt pressurised by their school work, and colleagues have touched on some of the influences or reasons as to why they may be feeling like this. Further research presented to the Education and Skills Committee found that while people can experience mental ill health at any time in their life, mental disorders tend to peak during adolescence and young adulthood. This was supported by findings that by 13 years of age, 1 in 3 young people will have experienced some type of mental disorder. Very shocking and stark figures. However, what was perhaps the most telling piece of research was provided by the Irish Royal College of Surgeons in 2013, which indicated that skills developed by children at a young age will help them cope better with stress and challenges in later life. These are findings which perhaps appear to be common sense, but for too long now we have failed as a state to provide such skills to students in our schools. As I was listening and thinking and reflecting upon the contributions of the debate so far, Minister, I couldn't help but come to the fore in my mind that very accomplished and important piece of writing by Paddy McPherson on education in Ireland when he wrote The Murder Machine, a line that always stuck out for me in terms of my approach to working as a classroom assistant and indeed any exchanges I have in this field, was that Pearse wrote, "You never lower yourself to the level of a child, you always raise yourself to the level of a child." And I always find that a very inspiring and important piece from that essay. But if we are dealing with a reality where so many young people find themselves, as they describe, low, they find themselves down, they find themselves suffering in an environment which should run contrary to providing, feelings completely contrary to those feelings, then I think that's a very stark wake-up call for us and those of us who can help play a role in changing that experience and that feeling within school life. So, as I acknowledge, Minister, this is a step in the right direction, but could I request that you, Minister, consider implementing similar wellbeing classes into the primary school curriculum through the SPHE class? I raise this point due to the ever-growing amount of academic research that suggests that the most important years in which we can proactively deal with preparing a child to deal with mental disorders is actually between the years of 7 and 11, and therefore the junior cycle will miss this key period in a child's life. Is this something that the Minister's Department have considered? And could the Minister also address concerns regarding the implementation of the new wellbeing class in secondary schools within the junior cycle? Are all schools mandated to allocate time for this subject in 2017-18 in the 2017-18 timetable? Will there be delays in the full integration of the subject, and if so, does the Department have a timeline by which schools have to work to? And also, how does the Department plan on monitoring its implementation? I would also like to remind the House that there is still a lot more that we can do to support the well-being of both children and teachers in our schools. There is little point in trying to educate our students on mental well-being if we do not provide the supports and services through which they can access help. There are currently 544 schools in the state which do not have access to national education psychological services for the purpose of carrying out assessments on students. For this reason, parents are being advised by schools to go privately or else face waiting so long on an appointment that the consequences are not worth consideration. Could the Minister tell the House if the Government are going to adequately provide for the NEPS in this year's budget, or will this deficit in mental health services continue? We also, Minister, continue to witness the ongoing consequence by the Government to no longer provide school guidance counsellors on an ex-quota basis. This was a service that provided exceptional value for money and a wide range of supports to students who otherwise have to wait up to 2 years before seeing outside agencies. Our young people need these supports, and the idea that a wellbeing class can simply replace both counsellors and NEPS is short-sighted. Do you, Minister, have any plans to address these two areas of support? And finally, I would like to address the well-being of teachers in our schools, Minister, and some people have touched on it already, teachers and classroom assistants, should I say. What supports does the Government intend to provide with our schools for teachers' well-being? Teachers are experiencing increased class size, increased workloads, while at the same time having to deal with pay inequality, as Senator Gallagher rightly touched on. So, Minister, perhaps you could maybe outline the Department's plan to address teachers' well-being and any supports Government plans to introduce. And just finally, Catherlock and Minister, perhaps you could touch on the actual practicalities. Minister, I'd be curious just to hear what, because you'll forgive my ignorance in this regard, but just what the wellbeing classes will entail, the mechanics of them. I was reading a very interesting article a few weeks ago about a school in the States that actually replaced detention with mindfulness meditation, which was having very significant social and psychological benefits for that school community. So in terms of the wellbeing, what does that look like, Minister, in terms of the practicalities of that being delivered to our school children?
And they do emphasise a different, a more healthy approach to eating and so on. Senator Byrne also focused on the importance of both the teacher and the learner as the leader of the learning environment in which we're trying to create a better learning environment where people feel more valued, more engaged. And as I said, I think that is key. Senator O'Donnell had a number of very positive, supportive points. He raised the issue of whether wellbeing should be a curriculum at primary level. Now, there is a wellbeing strategy going to place at primary level, but so far there is an SPHE programme at primary level, but I suppose it hasn't yet been considered at this point that we would have a so-called titled curriculum element, wellbeing. But the NCCA is reviewing the time allocations across the primary area, and it is possible for that to be assessed. You raise also, all schools are mandated now to introduce that. There will be a time during which they will move from the 300 hours that are now allocated to the 400 hours. And there are guidance in that document, which is, I'm not saying you should read it, but they do set out the sort of extra activities that could be in the extra hours. And they look at the role of other elements, such as art, music, home economics, to mention just a few. Aspects of food and health studies, there can be a lot of rich material brought in, and I think the emphasis of a number of contributors on reaching outside of the school community to try to populate those programmes is very, very worthwhile. Indeed, it's one of the core goals that I've set is that we build stronger bridges from our school communities to the wider community, whether it be enterprise or community or public service, our voluntary sporting agencies. I think those bridges can be really important from both directions. Raised the issue of some schools, about the difficulty of diagnostic assessment. We're moving away from diagnostic assessment now as the gateway to resource teaching. It still is the gateway for SNAs, but we're reviewing also the SNA model. I think the idea that nothing would happen until you got a diagnosis was wrong, and it's gone now. From this September, you get access to resource teaching without any diagnosis. It's based on the school's assessment of your learning need, and they have the resource and they assign it. And I think a lot of money was wasted, and it was inequitable because some people had access to such assessments and others didn't. It was inequitable, so we're doing away with that. Teachers' well-being is a very clear consideration, and in the rolling out of junior cycle, we're making a range for 22 hours of professional time. So that gives teachers that extra time to step back, plan their programme, because it is going to be different. So I hope, while obviously it's built in also consideration of teachers' well-being as something the school itself should consider in developing its plan, we're also creating some space, I believe, in the curriculum. The guidance is ring-fenced, so we've put back 400, so we've put back 2/3 of the guidance resource, and we've ring-fenced it. What we haven't said is that it can only be delivered by guidance counsellors. We have, strongly defended the idea that guidance is a whole school responsibility, and while the resource must be delivered for guidance and the guidance plan, it doesn't in every case have to be delivered by a guidance counsellor, but the plan is led by a guidance counsellor. So we feel that that gives a little bit of flexibility, that perhaps career could be sometimes handled by a science teacher. There's that little bit of flexibility in it. I know people will dispute that. We are putting, Senator Reardon then raised the issue of, are we focusing on